So my last Five Nights at Freddy's theory about Midnight Motorist, aka Later That Night, established the most likely identities of the location and some of the characters in the minigame, the most likely timeline placement of the minigame, and the motivations behind the characters. As I established, Junior's is most likely a sold-off Fredbear's, the house is most likely the FNAF 4 house, which is Afton's house. Michael is most likely the one that ran off, most likely to mourn his younger brother, and the game most likely takes place on the night right after Charlie died. This leaves a few more questions though. Who's on the couch? Does the actual driving minigame before Later That Night have any importance? Is Junior's actually a bar, or what actually is it? Why was Afton barred from going inside? To two of these questions, we can apply Occam's razor again. Why is Afton driving so fast on the highway and crashing into other cars? This is likely to depict reckless driving, such as if Afton was drunk. And if Afton is drunk, it's highly likely that he was at a bar before he killed Charlie. And as we know from the timeline placement of this minigame, the crying child died before Charlie did. Why does that matter? Because people under the influence tend to be more violent and impulsive, and a major reason for many people drinking is because of depression or anger. William would obviously be depressed that his younger son is dead and angry at his older son for partially causing that death. So, over the next few days, he starts drinking more and more alcohol, and eventually becomes so drunk that he's forced to take his anger out on someone, in this case Charlie. Why Charlie specifically? Well, a lot of theorists mention Afton's love-hate relationship with Henry Emily, Charlie's dad, and the co-owner of the Fazbear franchise. But a lot of that idea is taken from the plot of the Silver Eyes trilogy of novels. Scott Cawthon said himself when the first novel was published that the continuities of the games and the books aren't meant to fit together like puzzle pieces. However, at the same time, he also said that the books are a reimagining of the story from the games, and if we pay attention to that second statement, obviously a lot of elements from the games are present in the books, and vice versa, but the stories play out quite differently. Henry existed in the books 2 years before his appearance in Pizzeria Simulator, but in the novels meets a different end than he does in the games. The name of Afton's daughter was established as Elizabeth in Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, but she wasn't named until the third novel half a year later, and as Circus Baby served entirely different purposes in the games and the books. Therefore, while I do think we can use the original 3 books as evidence for what characters may or may not exist in the game, I don't think we can rely on them for evidence as a whole. Having said that, Charlie was locked out of Freddy's by mistake, and yes, it's a Freddy's because we established last time that Fredbear's closed down and turned it to Junior. This makes Charlie a convenient first target for Afton. The final book reveals that the real Charlie died in 1983, so if this is the year 1983 in the games as well, it makes sense to follow the crying child's death, given that also happens in 1983. Going on, given that Charlie is Afton's first direct victim, perhaps he would have ordinarily been hesitant to take his frustration out on his best friend's daughter, but being under the influence, his restraint and inhibition are absolutely gone, and he has no problem outright killing her. He would then return to the bar to try to forget what he'd just done, but they refuse to let him back in, likely because him being there last time resulted in a separate drunk fit that got him banned. He then returns home and finds that Michael isn't in his room and promised consequences for when he returns. There have been a lot of wild claims for what that punishment would be, like intentionally inducing nightmares to make Michael suffer, but today's theory isn't going into that territory, we're staying within the events of Later That Night. This leaves 2 questions now that I'd like to answer. Why doesn't Afton want Michael to run off? And who is it that's on the couch? If the pile of dirt that can be found early on in the minigame is in fact a grave, it's most likely the crying child's grave, as we've discussed before. and since Afton has been under the influence, he likely believes Michael has no right to mourn his brother whether he regrets his actions or not, which establishes the grave as that place again which Michael would have been to before. The reason Afton demands Michael keeps his door unlocked might be so Afton checks to see if he's still in the house more easily, perhaps because Michael already visited the grave, so Afton wants to make sure he stays in his room, as he's most likely grounded because of the accident. Then who's the person on the couch? The obvious answer would be Afton's wife. Scott clearly had the intention in mind even back then that these 5 characters were all meant to be one family, years before Security Breach confirmed that belief. As this person is being protective of Michael, it's reasonably likely that they are in fact his mother, so for this theory I will assume that's true. But there are a few more questions. What's with the footprints outside the window? There are a set of human footprints and a few more looking like an animatronic or an animal. Also, why is Michael's window not showing any glass on the outside if he broke out rather than broke in? The answer is simple. The window is broken, and with the level of graphics in the minigame, it wouldn't be able to display shards of glass even if they were on the outside. As for the footprints, it's well established in this series that dead children and sometimes even dead adults can possess animatronics. Given this, it's possible that the crying child, in the form of the Fredbear animatronic that ultimately killed him, walked up to Michael's window to visit him, perhaps to show that there were no hard feelings, and led Michael to his grave, maybe just for a bit of a chat, or maybe tell Michael that something more sinister was going on, and that his father had just committed a crime. The fact that the footprints aren't in the form of a trail doesn't really prove anything about maybe some apparition being able to make physical footprints, as some people have claimed. I would say they're really just there to show that some animal or animatronic was there and nothing more than that. Broken window is just there to show that someone escaped, not whether they broke in or out, as we wouldn't be able to see the glass regardless. So there we have our complete set of answers, or at least what I believe the answers should be. To recap, William is drunk because of his grief and anger, takes his anger out on Charlie, drunk drives down the highway, is denied entry into the same bar that got him drunk, gets back home to see his wife on the couch and Michael having run off to the pile of dirt near the beginning of the minigame, which is the crying child's grave. Because Michael is grounded, Afton wants his door unlocked at all times. Whether Elizabeth is still alive is uncertain, but I would say she most likely is, because the minigame's purpose is to show the house's most important rooms, and Elizabeth's and the crying child's rooms aren't relevant to the narrative that this minigame portrays. So there we have it. This is my take on Midnight Motorist and FNAF 6. If you disagree with my conclusions or reasoning, be sure to let me know in the comments. And if you like this video either way, be sure to press the like and subscribe buttons below, and consider leaving me a tip for my good efforts. As always, stay safe, stay cool, and I'll see you later.